My heartbeat was racing so fast I thought everyone could hear it echoing through the crowded hallway. I pulled my hoodie sleeves down further, desperately trying to hide myself as if the fabric could make me invisible, as if it could shield me from the reality I was living. But nothing could. The university felt like a prison of judgment, every pair of eyes drilling into me with disgust and curiosity. Pregnant Omega. College student. Alone. Those three labels had replaced my actual name and nobody called me Jian anymore. I'd become nothing more than that Omega. Look at him, someone whispered loud enough for me to hear, their voice dripping with cruelty. Pregnant and still showing his face here? Has he got no shame? Shame. The word pierced through my chest like an arrow finding its target. Should I feel ashamed? Maybe. Probably. But I was here because I had no other choice left in this world. Scholarships didn't extend to pregnant Omegas carrying babies alone and going back home. That door had slammed shut the moment I told my parents the truth. I held my breath as I pushed through the lecture hall doors. My backpack felt impossibly heavy, though it weighed nothing compared to the burden of my growing belly. It was still small, barely noticeable under loose clothing, but now it was visible enough that people knew. My scent had changed too. That sweet vanilla fragrance that used to be subtle had intensified with the pregnancy. Omega pregnancy scents don't hide themselves. They announce themselves to the world whether you want them to or not. Isn't that the guy who got himself knocked up by some random alpha? A male voice carried across the room, deliberately loud enough to ensure I heard every word. I stopped walking. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Random alpha? No. He wasn't random at all. He was Henrik Ashford, ruthless and powerful and absolutely terrifying in every way that mattered. And despite everything, despite the abandonment and the silence, I was still in love with him. But these people didn't know that. They'd made their assumptions, created their narratives, and Henrik? He wasn't here to defend me or claim what was his. He'd never been here. Jian, correct? A familiar stern voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Professor Carlin standing near the doorway, her face set in hard lines, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. My office. Immediately, my heart sank straight through the floor. After the lecture ended, I stood outside her office with trembling hands, knowing exactly what was coming. An expulsion letter, a suspension notice, or perhaps just another condescending speech about moral standards and the reputation of the institution. When I finally stepped inside, things felt even worse than I'd imagined. Professor Carlin studied me from head to toe, her gaze clinical and judgmental. Jian Monroe, she stated flatly. 3 months along, is that accurate? I managed only a small nod in response. And the father's whereabouts? My voice caught in my throat. He's not around anymore. Carlin removed her glasses slowly, pinching the bridge of her nose. I understand. The university board has been made aware of your situation, Mr. Monroe. While we don't typically expel students for personal circumstances, we do maintain certain academic and behavioral expectations. If your performance begins to slip in any way, it won't, I interrupted, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. I can handle this. I will handle it. She studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read, then released a long sigh. Very well. But understand this clearly. One mistake, one failed assignment, one missed class without proper documentation, and you're finished here. When I finally left campus, darkness had already settled over the city. My body felt completely drained, but my mind was racing even faster than before. I was walking toward the bus stop when my phone vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number flashed across the screen. I hesitated for several seconds before answering. Jian. Everything inside me froze completely. That voice. Deep and commanding. Terrifying yet intoxicating in equal measure. Henrik. Henrik? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Meet me tonight. Same location. Wait. I need to. The call disconnected. My hand was shaking as I lowered the phone. Same location. He meant the warehouse on the industrial side of town. The place where we'd first met 6 months ago, where he'd first claimed me as his, where everything between us had begun. And now, 3 months after vanishing from my life without explanation, he was coming back. But why now? Did he want me back in his life? Or had someone told him about the pregnancy? My heart pounded against my ribs. My scent grew stronger, broadcasting my anxiety and confusion to anyone with a sensitive nose nearby. Every logical part of my brain screamed that I shouldn't go, that meeting him was dangerous and stupid and would only lead to more heartbreak. But my body was already moving toward the bus that would take me across town. My omega instincts were already responding to the alpha who'd bonded with me. Because ignoring Henrik Ashford had never been an option I possessed, the bus ride felt endless. I watched the city lights blur past the windows, my hand resting protectively over my stomach. The baby shifted slightly. It was still too early to feel real movement, but I swore I could sense the life growing inside me. What am I doing? I whispered to myself. To the tiny life depending on me. Why am I going to see him? But I already knew the answer. Because despite the abandonment, despite the unanswered questions and the 3 months of devastating silence, Henrik Ashford still owned a part of me that I couldn't reclaim. The bond between Alpha and Omega wasn't something that simply disappeared when one person walked away. When the bus finally stopped near the warehouse district, I stepped off into the cold night air. The industrial buildings loomed around me like silent giants, their windows dark and empty. This part of town was abandoned after business hours, which made it the perfect place for secret meetings. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I walked toward the warehouse. The same rusted gate, the same chain-link fence, the same sense of anticipation and dread mixing together in my chest. I stopped just outside the entrance, staring at the building that held so many memories. Our first kiss had happened inside those walls. The first time he'd touched me, claimed me, made me his. The last morning I'd woken up in his arms before finding that note. Don't look for me. Those 4 words had destroyed me more thoroughly than any insult hurled at me on campus. I pushed the gate open. It creaked on rusty hinges, the sound cutting through the silence. There was no turning back now. Henrik was inside. I could feel him even before I saw him. That overwhelming alpha presence that made my omega instincts sing. Tonight would change everything. I could sense it in my bones. I just didn't know yet whether that change would save me or completely break me. Standing at the warehouse entrance felt surreal, like stepping back in time to a moment that should have stayed buried in my past. But it hadn't been that long. Only 3 months had passed since Henrik had left me sleeping in his bed, since I'd woken to find nothing but empty sheets and a note commanding me not to search for him. 3 months of silence, of unanswered questions, of learning to survive alone. I hadn't looked for him. Not once. Omegas are taught from childhood not to chase after alphas who leave. Let them go, move forward, survive. Those were the rules. But how could I move forward when my body still craved his scent like oxygen? When the baby growing inside me carried his DNA in every cell? I pushed the heavy door open. It groaned in protest, that same sound I remembered. Inside was darkness, but I knew he was there. I could sense his presence like a physical force in the air. Then he emerged from the shadows. Henrik Ashford in the flesh. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. Those dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel like prey and treasure simultaneously. His scent hit me immediately, cedar wood mixed with smoke, overwhelming and possessive. Every omega instinct I possessed screamed at me to move closer, to submit, to accept whatever he wanted from me. I forced myself to stand still. You actually came, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You called, I replied, trying to inject some strength into my tone. So yes, I came. What do you want from me, Henrik? He moved closer. The proximity felt suffocating. I've heard things. My heart dropped. Heard what exactly? That you're carrying a child. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of guilt or tenderness. There was neither. Just that same controlled intensity he always wore like armor. So what? I demanded, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. What are you planning to do about it? You abandoned me, Henrik. You disappeared without any explanation. I'm aware. He cut me off, his jaw clenching tight. I left because circumstances required it, not because I wanted to. That's completely inadequate, I shouted, feeling my voice crack with emotion. You can't just vanish from someone's life and then reappear acting like. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. The grip was firm, possessive, sending electricity through my entire arm. Stop, he commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Don't pretend you've forgotten what exists between us. Jan, I can smell the truth on you. You're still connected to me. Your Omega recognizes exactly who I am. Heat flooded my face, because he was absolutely right. My body recognized him on every level. His scent, his touch, the way his presence made my knees weak. And this baby? This life growing inside me belonged to him as much as it did to me. Then explain why you left, I whispered. My anger deflating into desperate confusion. Henrik stared at me like he wanted to say something important. But then his hand released my wrist and he stepped backward. Because my staying would have put you in danger, he said slowly, deliberately. I felt shocked. What are you talking about? But he didn't elaborate. He just watched me with that guarded expression, emotions locked away where I couldn't reach them. Go back to your apartment, Jan, he ordered. What? No, you can't just go home. Now. And just like that, he was leaving me again. I returned to my apartment with my chest tight and my eyes burning with unshed tears. The anger and confusion swirled together into something overwhelming. He'd left me again, walked away after dropping these cryptic statements about danger. I collapsed onto my couch and placed my hand over my stomach. The small bump was real and solid under my palm. We don't need him, I told the baby, though my heart called me a liar. Because the truth was painfully simple. I wanted Henrik. I'd always wanted him. And regardless of how far he ran, the connection between us wouldn't simply vanish into nothing. But he'd abandoned me twice now. Which meant I needed to make a decision about my future and the baby's future. Could I keep waiting for an alpha who clearly didn't want to stay? Or did I need to accept that I was doing this alone? I sat there in the darkness of my apartment, one hand on my belly, trying to find strength I wasn't sure I possessed. Omegas were supposed to be strong, resilient, capable of surviving anything. Maybe it was time to prove that to Henrik and to myself. The night stretched on endlessly. I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying every moment of our conversation. His words about danger kept circling through my thoughts. What kind of danger? From whom? And why did protecting me require complete abandonment? None of it made sense. Around midnight, I finally gave up on sleep and made myself tea. Something herbal and safe for the pregnancy. I stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the city lights, wondering if Henrik was out there somewhere looking back. My phone sat on the counter, silent and accusatory. Part of me wanted to call that unknown number, to demand real answers instead of cryptic warnings. But I knew he wouldn't answer. He'd made his choice clear. The tea grew cold in my hands as dawn started breaking over the city skyline. I had class in a few hours. Professor Carlin's warning echoed in my mind. One mistake and I was finished. I couldn't afford to fall apart over an alpha who'd left me. I had a baby to protect now, a future to build. Even if that future looked nothing like what I'd imagined when Henrik first claimed me 6 months ago. I dumped the cold tea down the sink and headed for the shower, letting hot water wash away the tears I'd finally allowed myself to cry. Today I would go to class. I would ignore the whispers and the stares. I would survive another day, because that's what Omegas did. We survived. But as I got dressed and gathered my books, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Henrik had come back for a reason, danger or no danger, and whatever he was involved in, whatever had made him leave, it was coming for both of us. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning at university, everything deteriorated rapidly. I was standing at my locker trying to organize textbooks for my morning classes, when I noticed them approaching. A group of alphas, all wearing identical smirks and radiating aggressive territorial sense. I recognized this behavior immediately. Intimidation tactics. Hey there, Gian, the leader called out. His name was Brock, campus's most notorious troublemaker. Heard some interesting gossip about you. Got yourself knocked up, huh? Who's the lucky alpha? Or was it just whoever was available? His friends erupted in laughter. My entire body went rigid. I refused to respond, instead focusing on pulling books from my locker with hands that wanted to shake. Come on, share the details, Brock continued, moving uncomfortably close. Was this guy actually serious about you? Or were you just convenient? My fist clenched around my biology textbook. Back off, Brock. Or what exactly? He shoved my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. You planning to cry about it? That's what Omegas excel at, isn't it? I was prepared to throw the first punch. Consequences be damned, when a new voice cut through the tension. Touch him one more time and I'll shatter your arm. Everyone turned simultaneously. At the end of the hallway stood Henrik, radiating controlled fury. My heart stopped completely. What was he doing here? Last night he'd pushed me away and now he was appearing on my campus? Protecting me? Brock looked genuinely confused. Who the hell are you supposed to be? Henrik took a measured step forward. His presence was so overwhelming that Brock actually retreated. The alpha scent rolling off Henrik was pure dominance, filling the entire corridor. Someone you definitely don't want as an enemy, Henrik stated calmly, though his words carried an unmistakable threat. Brock glanced between me and Henrik, and then recognition dawned across his features. Wait a second, Brock stammered, his eyes widening. You're Henrik Ashford. Gasps echoed through the hallway. Everyone knew that name. Henrik Ashford was legendary around campus, though he'd never attended classes here. Ruthless businessman, connections to both legal and illegal enterprises, a reputation for destroying anyone who crossed him. Rumors claimed he was only 28, but had already built an empire that legitimate corporations feared. And now he stood here. For me. Brock raised his hands defensively. Listen, man. I had no idea. Leave, Henrik commanded. One single word. Brock and his entire group fled like their lives depended on it. Silence descended. Henrik turned his attention to me. We need to have a conversation. I slammed my locker shut. You made your position perfectly clear last night. We don't need to talk. Jian, no. I interrupted, facing him directly. You don't get to play both sides. You can't abandon me and then suddenly appear playing the protective alpha. Henrik's jaw tightened visibly. I'm not playing any role. Those males were harassing you, and I'm capable of defending myself. I shot back, frustration boiling over, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted it to have. Henrik stepped closer, lowering his voice. Not while you're carrying my child. My breath caught in my throat. He'd said it, out loud. My child. Then start acting like it matters to you, I whispered as tears threatened to spill. Act like you actually care. Henrik's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped. I care more than you understand. That's precisely why I left. That still makes absolutely no sense. It will, he promised. Let me explain everything properly. Please. I searched his eyes and saw something I'd never witnessed before. Vulnerability. Fine, I agreed, but not anywhere on campus. We ended up at a quiet cafe, several blocks from the university. My coffee sat untouched in front of me, growing cold. Pregnancy meant limiting caffeine intake, so I just stared at Henrik, waiting for the explanation he'd promised. Why did you come to campus today? I asked. Because I needed to see you, Henrik admitted. And because I knew exactly what would happen. What do you mean, what would happen? Henrik exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he looked uncertain. Jian, I'm not merely a businessman. My family is involved in operations that aren't entirely legitimate. Import and export on the surface, yes. But underneath, dangerous dealings. Dangerous enemies. My stomach twisted into knots. I left you, Henrik continued, because those dangerous people discovered our relationship. They found out about you, and they made threats to use you as leverage against me. My heart plummeted. What kind of threats? I received a message, he said, pulling out his phone to show me a photograph. It displayed me standing outside my apartment building. The image had been captured from a distance. Clearly surveillance. My blood turned to ice. They wanted me to understand they could reach you whenever they chose, Henrik explained, his voice hardening. So I disappeared. I made them believe our relationship had ended. That you meant nothing to me. But I was already pregnant. I breathed. I didn't discover that until 2 weeks ago, Henrik said, leaning forward intently. Someone from my network informed me. I've been strategizing how to protect you ever since. Tears stream down my face freely now. You should have told me everything, Henrik. You should have. I know, he interrupted, grasping my hand firmly. I know, and I apologize. But I'm here now. And I'm not disappearing again. My breath hitched. Promise me. Henrik looked directly into my eyes. And for the first time I saw complete honesty there. I promise on our child's life. Jian. I'm not leaving you again. I squeezed his hand and for the first time in 3 months I felt something resembling hope blooming in my chest. Maybe we actually could navigate through this nightmare together. As we sat there, hands intertwined across the table, I realized something fundamental had shifted. Henrik wasn't just the alpha who'd claimed me anymore. He was the father of my child, and he was genuinely trying to protect us both. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now we make plans, Henrik said firmly. I move you somewhere safe. Somewhere my enemies can't locate you easily. I can't just abandon my education. You won't have to, he assured me. I'll arrange everything. Online classes, whatever you need. But your safety comes first. Both of you. His hand moved to rest gently over my stomach, and the gesture made my heart ache with emotions I couldn't name. This wasn't the fairy tale romance I'd imagined. It was complicated and dangerous and terrifying. But Henrik was here. He was trying. And maybe that was enough for now. Together? I whispered. Together, he confirmed. And in that moment, despite all the danger ahead, I believed him. The following evening, Henrik insisted I relocate to his penthouse immediately. I felt hesitant about the whole arrangement. Henrik, I can't simply abandon my apartment like this. That location isn't secure anymore, he stated firmly as we exited the cafe and walked toward his car. Those people know your exact address, Jian. That surveillance photograph I showed you earlier, that was merely their opening move. Next time they won't be satisfied with just watching from a distance. My stomach twisted uncomfortably at the implication. But all my belongings are there and my class schedule. I'll arrange for professional movers to handle everything, Henrik assured me. And my penthouse is only 10 minutes from campus by car. You won't miss any lectures or assignments. But you'll have comprehensive I've installed advanced security systems, surveillance cameras throughout the building, and I employ people whose loyalty I've verified personally. I searched his eyes and found genuine concern there. Real worry beneath that controlled exterior. All right, I finally agreed. But only until this situation, whatever it actually is, gets resolved. Henrik nodded, though his expression suggested he understood something I didn't yet grasp. Like he knew resolved wasn't going to be as simple as either of us hoped. By the next afternoon, I found myself standing in Henrik's penthouse for the first time. The high-rise building offered floor-to-ceiling windows with breathtaking city views, luxury furnishings in every direction. Compared to my cramped student apartment, this felt like entering a completely different universe. Make yourself at home, Henrik said while giving me a tour of the space. Your bedroom is down this hallway. Private bathroom attached. The kitchen stays fully stocked, and my personal chef can prepare whatever you're craving at any hour. I felt overwhelmed by the extravagance surrounding me. Henrik, this seems excessive. Nothing is excessive when it concerns you, he interrupted, turning to face me directly. You're carrying my child. I'll provide whatever you need. My heart fluttered unexpectedly at his words. But living in Henrik's world meant witnessing aspects of his life I'd never encountered before. And his world operated far outside the boundaries of normal. I discovered this truth on my very first night there. Unable to sleep, I'd gotten up around midnight to get some water from the kitchen when I heard Henrik's voice coming from his study. His tone was low and absolutely lethal. I don't care what methods are required, he was saying into his phone. Locate them immediately, and ensure they comprehend exactly what consequences follow when someone threatens what belongs to me. My breath caught in my throat. I retreated quietly back to my bedroom, but sleep became impossible after overhearing that conversation. Who were these people he was hunting? And what methods was Henrik employing to handle them? The following days passed with relative normalcy on the surface. Henrik left for his office each morning while I attended university. He provided me with a professional driver and security detail for transportation, always emphasizing my safety. On campus, I noticed the whispers had evolved. Students still gossiped, but nobody dared approach me directly anymore with their cruel comments. Perhaps Henrik's reputation was already working in my favor, but one night everything changed catastrophically. I was in my bedroom studying late, working through a biochemistry assignment, when I heard raised voices echoing through the penthouse. Harsh tones, barely contained fury. I cracked my door open carefully and peered out. Henrik stood in the living room confronting two dangerous-looking men. Their appearances screamed criminal enforcers, rough and intimidating. You think you can simply walk away from us, Ashford? One demanded aggressively. You're still in debt to our organization. I owe your organization absolutely nothing, Henrik replied, his voice colder than ice. Our arrangement concluded months ago. Not until we declare it concluded, the second man threatened. Then I watched in horror as one of them produced a handgun. My heart stopped beating entirely. "Henrik!" I started to shout a warning, but suddenly Henrik moved with incredible speed. He twisted the first man's arm viciously, forcing the weapon to clatter onto the floor. When the second attacker lunged forward, Henrik handled him with brutal efficiency, landing precise punches that demonstrated extensive combat training. Within seconds, both intruders were groaning on the floor. Henrik stood over them, breathing hard but controlled. "Leave immediately, and deliver a message to whoever sent you. If anyone else comes here, they won't leave this building alive." The two men stumbled toward the exit, supporting each other. Silence descended. Then Henrik's gaze found me standing frozen near my doorway. My face drained of color, eyes wide with shock. "Jian," I stepped fully into the living room. "What in hell was that?" Henrik examined his knuckles, which were bleeding from the impacts. "Just business matters." "That wasn't business," I shouted, my voice shaking. "That was violence. They brought a weapon, Henrik." "I'm aware," he said calmly, moving toward the kitchen sink to rinse his injured hands. "And I neutralized the threat. You could have been killed." Tears were building behind my eyes. "We both could have." Henrik crossed the distance between us and pulled me against his chest. "I'm unharmed. You're safe. That's the only thing that matters right now." But I wasn't safe. I was terrified. "Henrik," I said, my voice barely steady, "what exactly did you do in your past? Who were those men?" He released a heavy sigh. "Associates from my history. An arrangement I made several years ago that I've been attempting to terminate." "What kind of arrangement requires armed confrontations?" "The kind that doesn't permit easy exits," he admitted quietly. I looked into his eyes and finally understood the complete picture. Henrik wasn't just in danger himself. We were in danger. Me. Our unborn child. Everything. "I can't do this," I whispered, stepping backward. "I can't bring a baby into this environment, Henrik. Living in constant fear." "You won't have to," Henrik said with absolute conviction. "I'm terminating all of it. Every connection, every obligation. For your safety. For our child's future." "How exactly?" I demanded desperately. "How can you just terminate years of criminal connections?" Henrik cupped my face gently. "By doing what I should have done long ago. By severing every tie completely, regardless of how many enemies that creates." "That sounds like you're placing yourself in even greater danger." "I don't care about my own safety," he said intensely. "Only yours matters." My heart simultaneously broke and healed at those words. "Then allow me to help you," I insisted. "Absolutely not." "Henrik, please listen," I interrupted. "I'm not just some Omega who needs constant protection. I'm your partner in this. Let me participate." Henrik hesitated, clearly torn. Then he slowly nodded. "All right," he agreed. "We'll handle this together." That night, we developed our strategy. It was dangerous and risky, requiring us to confront the very people who wanted to control Henrik's life. But it was our plan. Our choice. Our fight. As I sat beside Henrik reviewing details and contingencies, I realized something profound. This wasn't the romantic relationship I'd imagined when we first met. It was complicated and terrifying and far from any fairy tale. But we were facing it as partners, as equals. And that mattered more than I'd understood before. The baby moved inside me, a gentle flutter that reminded me why we were doing this, why the risk was necessary. "We're going to survive this," I said aloud, half statement and half prayer. Henrik took my hand. "We will. I promise you that." And for the first time since those men had invaded our home, I believed him. The following week brought escalating tension that made breathing feel difficult. Henrik discovered through his intelligence network that his enemies, an underground criminal syndicate called the Collective, had specifically targeted me. Their leader, known only as Voss, wanted Henrik back under their control, for reasons Henrik refused to explain fully, and they intended to use me as leverage to force his compliance. Henrik immediately increased security measures. I stopped attending campus entirely after he contacted my professors and arranged for temporary remote learning. My entire existence became confined within the penthouse walls. I felt suffocated by the restrictions. "I can't continue living like this," I told Henrik one afternoon. "Trapped inside, hiding from shadows." "It's only temporary," Henrik responded, though I detected frustration in his voice. He was struggling with this situation as much as I was. "You keep repeating that word," I said, But when exactly does temporary end? Henrik met my gaze, and for the first time, I witnessed complete helplessness in his expression. I honestly don't know, he admitted. That honesty hurt worse than any lie could have. It meant he had no control over our situation, no guaranteed timeline for resolution. But then one night, everything collapsed catastrophically. I was sleeping when suddenly I jolted awake to blaring alarms throughout the penthouse. Henrik burst into my bedroom, his face set in grim determination. "Get up right now. What's happening?" "They've breached building security," he said urgently, pulling me from the bed. "Voss sent a team. We need to evacuate immediately." My heart raced with adrenaline. Henrik guided me toward a concealed exit I'd never noticed before, a private elevator that descended directly to the underground parking garage. We got into his car, Henrik taking the wheel, and we accelerated out of the building at dangerous speeds. "Where are we heading?" I asked, panic making my voice tight. "Safe house location," Henrik answered tersely. "Outside city limits." But before we could even reach the highway, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Fast and aggressive. "They're pursuing us," I whispered in horror. Henrik pressed the accelerator harder. The chase began in earnest, our car weaving through late-night traffic at speeds that made my stomach lurch. I was absolutely terrified, gripping my seatbelt with one hand while the other protected my belly. "Henrik, hold on tight," he commanded. Suddenly gunfire erupted. The rear window shattered into 1,000 pieces. I screamed involuntarily. Henrik executed a sharp turn that nearly flipped the vehicle, but his driving skills kept us upright. Then he produced a handgun from somewhere already loaded. "Stay down below the dashboard," he ordered. I crouched down, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Henrik fired out his window with remarkable precision. I heard one of the pursuing vehicles lose a tire and spin out behind us. But another car continued the chase relentlessly. Henrik took another sharp turn into a narrow alleyway that our pursuers couldn't navigate as easily. We emerged on a different street and finally lost them in the maze of urban infrastructure. Eventually, we arrived at the safe house, a secluded cabin hidden deep in forested wilderness outside the city. Henrik practically carried me inside. My entire body was trembling uncontrollably. "Are you injured?" he demanded, checking me frantically from head to toe. "The baby." "We're both fine," I managed to say, though my whole body felt like it might shake apart. Henrik embraced me tightly, desperately, like he'd been terrified of losing me forever. "I'm profoundly sorry," he whispered against my hair. "I never wanted you exposed to any of this violence." I gripped his face between my hands. "Then finish it, Henrik. Whatever it requires. End this nightmare." Henrik searched my eyes, and I watched him make a decision. "I will," he vowed. "Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Voss directly, and I'm ending the collective's hold on my life permanently." My heart plummeted. "That's suicide." "It's our only option," Henrik insisted. "If I don't confront this directly, they'll never stop coming after us. And I refuse to risk you or our child any longer." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "Then I'm accompanying you to this meeting." "Absolutely not." "Yes, I am," I stated firmly. "You told me we're partners in this, so let's finish it together." Henrik clearly wanted to argue, to protect me by leaving me behind, but he recognized the determination in my expression. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Together then," he whispered. That night we held each other with desperate intensity, because tomorrow could change everything. Tomorrow could end with us finally free or completely destroyed. I lay awake for hours, feeling the baby move inside me. This tiny life depending on us to survive, to make the right choices, to protect them from a world neither of us had anticipated. "I love you," I whispered to Henrik in the darkness. His arms tightened around me. "I love you more than I thought possible." We'd never exchanged those words before. The timing felt both perfect and terrifying, like we were tempting fate by acknowledging our feelings before the final confrontation. But I needed him to know. If tomorrow went wrong, if Voss didn't accept Henrik's terms, I needed Henrik to understand how much he meant to me. "No matter what happens," Henrik said softly, "you and our baby will be protected. I've made arrangements. Money, security, everything you'll need." "Stop," I interrupted. "Don't talk like you're preparing to die." "I'm preparing for every possibility," he corrected. "That's different." I turned in his arms to face him directly. "We're both walking out of that meeting tomorrow, together, with our future intact." Henrik kissed me then, slow and deep and filled with everything we couldn't say aloud, and I chose to believe that tomorrow would bring resolution, not tragedy, because the alternative was unthinkable. As dawn began breaking through the cabin windows, we rose and prepared for the confrontation that would determine everything. Henrik checked his weapons while I dressed in layers, trying to protect my belly as much as possible. "Stay behind me at all times," Henrik instructed. "Don't speak unless I indicate it's safe. And if anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," I said with more confidence than I felt. Henrik pulled me close one more time. "You're the strongest person I've ever known. Then let's prove that together," I replied. We got into the car and drove toward the abandoned warehouse where the meeting was scheduled. The same warehouse where Henrik and I had first met all those months ago. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. This was where our story began. And today it would either continue or end forever. The meeting location was an abandoned warehouse on the industrial side of town. The irony struck me immediately. This was the exact place where Henrik and I had first encountered each other 6 months earlier, where our complicated relationship had begun with passion and intensity, where I'd first felt the overwhelming pull of an alpha bond. And now this same location might witness our ending. Henrik positioned me behind him protectively as we entered. His security team, 5 trusted men armed and alert, formed a defensive perimeter around us. But I understood the risks involved. Voss was notoriously dangerous, and no amount of preparation guaranteed our safety. Then he appeared from the shadows. Voss was tall and distinguished looking, probably in his late 50s with silver-gray hair immaculately styled. His presence commanded attention in a way similar to Henrik's, but where Henrik radiated controlled power, Voss emanated something darker. Corruption and cruelty barely concealed beneath a veneer of sophistication. "Henrik Ashford," Voss said, his smile cold and calculating. "You've been remarkably difficult to locate recently." "I've been finished with your organization," Henrik responded flatly. "Our arrangement concluded 2 years ago." "Not entirely," Voss countered smoothly. "You still carry obligations to the collective." And now, his gaze shifted deliberately to me, assessing. "Now you've provided me with additional leverage I hadn't anticipated." My blood turned ice cold. "Touch him and I'll kill you myself," Henrik growled, his voice promising violence. Voss laughed, genuinely amused. "Such devotion. Tell me honestly, Henrik, is this Omega truly worth sacrificing everything you've built? Your business empire? Your reputation? Your future?" Without hesitation, Henrik answered immediately. Voss's smile faded into something harder. "Then you're more foolish than I credited," Voss said dismissively. He signaled to his men, and instantly multiple weapons were aimed in our direction. But Henrik had anticipated this. He signaled as well, and his security team responded, creating a tense standoff. "I possess something that interests you greatly," Henrik said calmly, showing no fear despite the guns pointed at us. "Indeed?" Voss raised one eyebrow skeptically. Henrik gestured, and one of his men brought forward a sleek metal briefcase, setting it on a table between the two groups. "Financial ledgers. Complete documentation of every transaction the collective has conducted over the last decade. Every illegal deal, every corrupt official you've bribed, every name of everyone you've ever blackmailed. All verified and backed up in multiple secure locations, ready for immediate transmission to federal authorities, unless you allow us to walk away freely." Voss's expression darkened dangerously. "You're attempting to bluff me. Test that theory if you wish," Henrik challenged. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, could feel the baby moving restlessly inside me as if sensing the danger surrounding us. Tension stretched between the two groups like a wire pulled to breaking points. Then Voss did something unexpected. He laughed, though the sound held no humor. "You've developed more courage than I remembered, Ashford. I'll acknowledge that much." He made a subtle gesture, and his men slowly lowered their weapons. "Take your Omega," Voss said with dismissive finality. "Disappear somewhere I'll never encounter you again. But understand this clearly, if our paths ever cross in the future, those ledgers won't provide sufficient protection." Henrik nodded once. "Understood completely." We began moving toward the exit, slowly and carefully, nobody making sudden movements that might reignite the confrontation. My legs felt weak, barely supporting my weight, But I forced myself to walk steadily. Not until we were actually inside Henrik's car with the engine running did I allow myself to breathe properly. Is it truly finished? I whispered, afraid to believe it. Henrik took my hand in his, squeezing gently. Yes. It's over now. Tears of overwhelming relief streamed down my face. We returned to the safe house cabin, and that night, for the first time in weeks, we both felt genuinely secure. Henrik held me close, his hand resting protectively over my belly where our child grew. I love you, Jian, he said quietly. My heart soared despite my exhaustion. We'd said these words the night before, but hearing them now, after surviving everything, made them feel more real. I love you too, I responded, smiling through my tears. So much. We kissed then, deep and honest and filled with the promise of an actual future together. The following months passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the chaos we'd survived. Henrik completely severed all connections to his previous criminal associations, restructuring his business empire to operate entirely within legal boundaries. I returned to campus and completed my semester with grades that surprised even me, and our baby continued growing healthy and strong. When labor finally began on a sunny morning in early spring, Henrik was beside me every single moment. He held my hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement when I wanted to give up, never left my side. Our son was born just after dawn, small and perfect and absolutely beautiful. A healthy baby boy with Henrik's distinctive dark eyes and what the nurses assured me was my smile. Henrik held our son for the first time with an expression I'd never witnessed before. Pure joy mixed with overwhelming love and a hint of fear, like he couldn't quite believe this precious life was real. Thank you, he said softly, looking at me with tears in his eyes. For everything. For what specifically? I asked, exhausted but happier than I'd ever been. For refusing to give up on me, Henrik said, his voice thick with emotion. For fighting beside me when you could have run. For loving me even during the moments I didn't deserve any of it. I reached out and took his hand. You always deserved love, Henrik. Always. Our son made a soft cooing sound, like he agreed with my statement. We named him Asher, meaning blessed and fortunate, because that's exactly what he was. What we all were. 6 months later, we stood together in our new home. A beautiful house in the suburbs far from the city and all its dangerous memories. Henrik had left his penthouse behind, choosing instead a place where Asher could grow up safely. With a yard and neighbors in normalcy, I watched Henrik playing with Asher on the living room floor, making silly faces that drew delighted giggles from our son. This was what I'd dreamed about during those dark months when I'd faced pregnancy alone. A family. Love. Security. What are you thinking about? Henrik asked, noticing my expression. How far we've come, I answered honestly. How much has changed? Henrik stood and crossed to where I sat, pulling me into his arms. Everything changed the night I met you in that warehouse. You became my entire world without me even realizing it was happening. We saved each other, I said simply. Yes, he agreed. We did. Asher made demanding sounds from his playmat, wanting attention. We both laughed and went to him together. A family united and whole. The journey had been terrifying and dangerous and nothing like the fairy tale romances I'd read about as a young Omega dreaming of my future, but it was real. It was ours, and I wouldn't change a single moment.